Well, hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to All Access Pass here on board the Rock and Romance Cruise. My name is Jason Venner, and I have the esteemed honor of being your host for these next 5 days. I do apologize for those of you at home and in your rooms listening to this. I promise you I'll do everything I can to get it better to tomorrow so you don't have to suffer through this with me. Today, All Access Pass, I have a very, very special interview. In fact, we usually don't do All Access Pass on the first day of the cruise, specifically because we like to set things up. But we had to do one today because this was the only day that this group could do an interview, and we thought, you know what, we'll put an extra one in because they are absolutely, without question, worth it. Today, I'm very excited to welcome to the stage two legends. You know them, you love them. Put your hands together for America! Welcome. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Great to be here.
You're sitting on your mic, sir.
Am I?
Yep. It's not the sound we wanted from you today, sir. If you could just...
Leave it to me.
We'll take the other end. Of course, all of you know and love Jerry and Dewey as two of the founding members of America. Thank you so much for being here, gentlemen.
Our pleasure.
Great to be
Great
here.
to see
Not just to chat today, but more importantly, here on the cruise. You know, I know you guys are busy. You have a lot of things. And I think the amount of people in this room right now speaks to exactly how honored we are to have you with us.
Very nice.
We're
Thank
very
you
happy
all.
to be here. Thank you.
Pleasure. Ahoy, mateys.
Yes. So I'll lob some softballs at you to start, just to kind of get. A lot of people ask the same question: how does it start? How does the group get together?
Well, we went to high school together. We were just teenagers playing music. The difference was we were in England. Our dads were Americans, but our fathers were American Air Force, and we were stationed in London, or our dad was, and the families were there in the mid-'60s. We graduated from that high school in 1969. Jerry and I met with Dan Peake, of course, the founding trio. We were great friends, spent a lot of time cruising around London, listening to music and live shows that we still can't believe we saw. Bands like Pink Floyd and The Who and Elton John and tons of great shows. It was terrific. Jimi Hendrix. And the band, the high school band, just morphed from playing cover tunes. Suddenly we were writing our own material. That was the key to everything, original material. That's what perked up the ears of the London music community, and we made a few key contacts with people there. Jerry actually was the first one to get his foot in the door of an actual recording studio, I think about 17 years old. And one thing led to another, and we put together what became the core of the of the songs that we'd written that became the first album. And I mean, it was just a whirlwind thing. We look back now after all these years, 47 years.
We actually we played live in the offices of the record companies there. We didn't have any recordings yet, and so we would take our 3 acoustics and go sit in the office of the vice president, for example, of Warner Brothers or something, or of Atlantic Records. And we didn't realize that you were really supposed to just kind of stick with one, you know, and you'd start to negotiate. And so they would all then meet afterwards for cocktails. You know, what have you been doing? And the guy from Warner say, we had this great group in America, and they're fantastic. We're going to sign. And the guy from Atlantic say, we had them in. We're going to sign them. You know? So we actually got an offer from everybody we played with, and we chose Warner Brothers.
We were basically just trying to get somebody to pay for our demos. You know, at that point we didn't have any. We were certainly your classic poor guys with acoustic guitars. You know, living in this little farmhouse that we had rented. It was like amazing how little we had, and yet how much we had, because we were so excited about our music, and we were focused, and the 3 of us just had this energy that was so terrific to be able to turn it into this thing. But they paid for the demos, so.
Most importantly.
Yeah.
And but even before that, if you don't mind, were your parents supportive of you going into music and whatnot? I mean, you know, coming from military families?
My mother was a fanatic, still to this day. She's still with us, but she raised me personally on classical music, and I used to sit in front of the hi-fi in the living room and listen to these classical basically the Russians, Tchaikovsky and Rachmaninoff and stuff. And fortunately, the house that we lived in had a piano. It was a rental house, but it furnished with a piano. And I started learning how to play piano. And so got me taking piano lessons when I was 3 and supported, I guess as a hobby. Nobody thinks that they're going to steer you into a musical career. When we finally got going and we were starting to play acoustically, my dad called. My brother was going to college in the States, and he said, when you get over here back to London in the summer, I'd like you to try and talk some sense into your little brother. and when Michael, my brother, landed, Horse with No Name was #1, and he said to my dad, well, what do you want me to tell him now?
Parents always know best, Jerry.
My mother was always very supportive, and she thought the songs were great. My dad was the same, like any dad. Yeah, let's see if you can make this happen. But they were all supportive and made him proud, I think, at the end of the day.
There was not a long lag time between when we started doing this and when the record came out. So if anybody had any qualms about it, they were pretty quickly squashed. You know?
Horse with No Name was on your first album, correct? I mean,
technically, it wasn't on the album.
We re-released. Yeah.
We'd recorded the album. It was all set. Warner's had decided. We'd sequenced it. The first single was going to be "I Need You," which turned out to be the second single, as it did turn out. But "I Need You"
You can clap for that. You can clap for "I Need You." Sorry.
Yeah, great song. "I Need You" was, everybody thought it's going to be a standard, and it pretty much has become a standard. Lots of people have covered it. But then the record company said, well, you guys are so full of your energy. Have you got any other full of yourselves?
Energy was the word. Yeah, energy.
Yeah. Full of energy. Maybe you got some more stuff. And we went in and recorded 4 other songs, and Horse with No Name was one of those. And I frankly always thought it was just a bit of a novelty song for us. I mean, I had written it, if we're probably going to go into that what's it about thing. And
there's lots of those. I think every other card is what is it about, yeah. So.
Well, I'll nip it in the bud.
You can jump into it right now.
Pretty much a travelogue. I've always said it. It was about the sights and sounds of the desert. It was a song that I pined for the desert. Being Air Force kids, we'd lived in lots of places around the U.S. and the world, in fact. And I'd always had a soft spot for the Southwest in New Mexico and Southern California and the Mojave Desert. We'd spent time there. And my brother and I would spend time catching lizards and snakes and things. And, of course, England did not have anything even close to that. It was rain, and we lived during a time when it really seemed to be rainy constantly. So it was inspired by the desert, period. But they liked that song, and they thought, hey, there might be something.
That was the first title. It was titled originally Desert Song.
That's right.
My 2 favorite things about when that came out was we later got to be very good friends, rest in peace, with Andrew Gold, the talented singer-songwriter. And he used to say to both of us, he said, you know, it just irked the hell out of me. He said, I could handle the plants and birds and rocks. He said, but the things. What? He just felt that was like, you know.
The heat was hot, didn't go down too well either.
And then long before we met Randy Newman, we were all signed to Warner's at the same time, or with Warner Brothers. But Randy Newman, when asked, you know, because he hadn't really met us, and what's Horse with No Name, and he said, that's about a guy who thinks he took acid.
One of my favorites, and then we'll end it with this thing.
Please.
That song makes a lot of worst song lists around the world, various things. And one year, our friend Bobby Woods, he said, "Hey, you made it onto this worst songs
top
list.
10 worst songs." Yeah.
Top 10, and I think we were like number 3 or something. And he said, "You got robbed." I always like that one.
How does the title go from Desert Song to A Horse with No Name?
Ian Samwell, who was co-producing, had done the first album and then did the sessions for Horse. Right away, just without even asking us, said, well, you got to call it Horse with No Name. He said, there's an opera, The Desert Song. You know, and so in his mind, it was a title that was already attached to something else. But Dewey wrote, I think, basically Dewey, with the approach, there was Rainbow Song, Desert Song.
I titled a lot of the songs I was working on at the time, just something song.
Got it.
You know, and whatever the primary theme was. So that was just the working title, if you will. And our then producer, like Jerry said, he said, "Oh, it must be Horse with No Name." He was British.
There is one other bit of trivia, but most of you might already know this. But because the album came out in England, and it did quite well for us, and a few months later, we went back in the studio, which is kind of unheard of to go immediately back in, and we released Horse with No Name as a single, or what was called a maxi single then. It had 3 tracks on it or something. It went to #1 in England. None of this had been released. This was in late '71 in England. When you sign to Warner Brothers in the UK, that doesn't necessarily mean that you'll get even released in the States. A lot of the satellite divisions of the major labels sign local acts and things, and that's how we got signed. But the Warner Brothers office, Burbank in California, will review what's under contract, and they saw that we had a hit album and a hit single, and they said, oh, well, we should bring them over. We'll release that in the States, which they planned for February of '72. So the label in England sent the parts, what they call, which is the things that you press the vinyl from, sent the parts for the single and the parts for the album. And the Burbank office just assumed that Horse was on the album, and they pressed up 100,000 copies of each before somebody realized that the single isn't on the album. So some people will sometimes come to us with copies of the first album that don't include...
The original.
Yeah, the original, that don't include Horse. And that's why... So it's actually a rarity and far more exclusive to not have the hit on it.
You're luckier to not have that.
Well, it is the 3rd worst song of all time, apparently. Yeah. So, you know, maybe...
By the way, our dear friend Jimmy Webb, the #1 worst song was MacArthur Park, which we love, of course. So we were in good company.
You're in very good company. That's a lightning fast first segment. Don't turn the channel, don't go away. We'll be right back with more with America. Hey, thanks for not changing the channel. Thanks for not walking away. I'm back with more with America.
Thank you. Yeah.
Spontaneity is the #1 form of flattery, gentlemen, spontaneity. 1970, in fact, December of 1970, December 20th exactly, you played Implosion. And you opened for The Who, Elton John, and some people say that was your first major gig. Do you agree with that? How did that moment feel for you?
We played a few times. That was at the Roundhouse in Chalk Farm in the suburb of London. And we had a manager at the time named Jeff Dexter, who was quite a legend in London. He was a DJ, and he had done the Isle of Wight festivals and stuff, and he would get us on those shows. So yes, it was a debut in a sense to do that show. You can't have a bill better than that. And Elton had just broken in the States, had just played the Troubadour and made, national headlines. But to Jeff's credit, he put us on a few shows there, and I think within a month we also, just the 3 of us on stools, we opened for Pink Floyd, who were performing Adam Hart Mother with a 90-piece orchestra and choir. So,
and just the 3 of you on stools opened up.
We got lost in the shuffle.
Yeah, we had some wonderful... I flew with Roger Waters last year sometime, and I reintroduced myself, and I said, do you remember that night? He goes, I remember it very well.
And then you win the Grammy for Best New Artist.
Yeah, that was exciting. We had come back to the U.S. by then. We were being managed by David Geffen. We were in an office with a lot of our songwriting inspirations and heroes, Crosby, Stills and Nash, and Joni Mitchell, and J.D. Souther, and Jackson Browne, and the Eagles were just starting. Eagles had just put out their first album, and
the nominations. That was a fantastic year, and it was an honor. But the nominees were ourselves, the Eagles, Loggins and Messina, Harry Chapin, and John Prine. So that's a fantastic. And we were gonna go. We were actually on the road, no surprise. And we had a night off, and we were told we're gonna go and we're gonna appear. They were actually in Nashville that year, and at the last minute, our people said, "No, it's off. We're not going." I'm like, "Oh, geez. Well, we'll watch it on TV." And the first award every time is still Best New Artist. And they said, and before we announce the winners, here are nominees, Loggins and Messina. And they were there, and so we thought, well, that's it. They must have won. So they performed Your Mama Don't Dance or something like that. And the winner is America. And we weren't there. There was nobody there. So they assigned somebody to accept if you're not there. And so they said, and accepting for America is Dusty Springfield. With a shocked look, she walked up and she kind of said, well, I bet the lads are very happy. And I swear, a couple weeks later, on my doorstep in Dewey's, a box came from the NARIS, from the Grammy organization, with 3 dreaded words on the box: "Some assembly required." You had to put the Grammy together.
Did you do it correctly?
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Did you? The right end is on top, I hope. Yeah, correct. Vocal Group Hall of Fame. Vocal Group Hall of Fame, obviously a wonderful honor. Your own star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. You mean you've been acknowledged?
Thank you. Yeah, these are.
Do the honors still mean as much? I mean, or are they? Do you seek the honors? A lot of guys say no, but they love them for the acknowledgement of the people. What do the honors mean?
It's very flattering. It's very, rewarding and humbling and all of the above. It's a terrific thing. The star on Hollywood Walk of Fame, I certainly wish my mother had been alive for that. She
That
had
was
stacks
great.
of movie magazines, and probably the first time I ever saw what the star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame was in one of her magazines. But it was terrific, and I know she would have been excited about that. And we were. That was a terrific day. John Stamos, a good friend of ours, and Billy Bob Thornton were the celebs who had read great things about us and inducted us that day, and all of our friends and past members of the band, past producers and engineers.
Yeah.
It really was a very overwhelming turnout of the people who've made our career what it was.
Well,
So,
well deserved though. I mean, it's not like it's well deserved turnout. You
it
guys
was
earned
terrific.
that
It
already.
really was. It was that one I really will never forget that day.
The Rock Hall has come up quite a bit now lately, and we used to,
Sure.
with all due respect, which we think it's a wonderful organization, but never really felt that we were quite of the tier to be, to get in there. But now that our buddies Chicago are in there, we're starting to get a little irked. Hey, wait a minute,
So, what are your feelings about Chicago then? If you weren't of that
No,
tier,
we
I'm
love
joking, I'm
we love
joking.
to work with
Jokes.
Chicago. We love to gig with them because they're one of the only groups older than us.
That's true too.
Well, gentlemen, as I was explaining to you before, we have a handful of questions from our audience, people that love you and adore you and want to know a little bit more about you. And if you don't mind, I'll lead into a few of those.
Of course.
David, all the way from New Jersey, says, Jerry, what was the significance of the number 29 you wore?
I think most of us have a favorite number. Mine has been, as long as I can remember, 29, because it was the address of my grandmother's house in England. In England, people name their homes. I had a cottage in Sussex for 30 years, and it was called the Old Forge. So people give personal names. My grandmother's house didn't have a name. It was 29 Foresters Drive. So long before I could really talk or knew what numbers were, going to 29 was a wonderful thing for me. So I have a publishing company, 29 Songs.
Great,
and that's
great
fun.
story. Of all of Roscoe from Indianapolis, great name, Roscoe. Of all of your songs, which is the most difficult to perform?
Anything Jerry wrote for me, is difficult. No, Jerry does write songs that are quite complex, lots of chords, and I'm a 3-chord guy.
Yeah, the joke is if it's 2 chords, Dewey wrote it. If it's 102, I wrote
That's
it.
pretty true. It's that piano training Jerry had and listening to those Russian composers as a kid. But they're fantastic songs. Sister Golden Hair is a complex song in and of itself, and it doesn't seem so. But, that song called Inspector Mills, another of Jerry's, is a beautiful song, very complex as well. I remember, chewing the inside of my cheek off trying to learn that one. But I'm kind of a feral musician myself. I didn't get a lot of training, and Jerry always
Feral
was.
musician, what a great term.
We have
Yeah.
a following around the world, and on occasion we get the honor to go to the Philippines and play in the Philippines.
Yeah, we love.
And that's why.
Manila.
Inspector Mills is a big hit in the Philippines. So every time we go, we're going to Manila, and then everybody goes, Inspector Mills.
Got to learn Inspector Mills.
Got to
All
relearn.
My Life is a big song in the Philippines. Yeah.
Yeah.
We've been very fortunate over the years to have great fan bases. Obviously, our American fans are the greatest, but it's true. But we do play Australia quite a bit. We have a great following down there, and Italy, and Brazil. We do Brazil. Yeah, we love Brazil. And Argentina.
We were just in Buenos Aires.
We were just in Buenos Aires. Yeah. No.
All right, we get
have
it.
not played Venezuela.
We get it.
Yeah, we have to play Venezuela sometime.
Well,
maybe.
counter that question. What song do you enjoy playing the most, other than all of Dewey's?
I think I've always said the Ventura Highway seems to have, for me anyway. And I love Daisy Jane. If I was to pick one of Jerry's, of those core hits, of the things that charted, and most people are familiar with, the greatest hit songs
Sure.
of that batch. Ventura Highway and Daisy Jane for me are really. They still seem to have that. They conjure up the same imagery for me that they did in the inspired moment.
Hits are magic things anyway, and people would say, what the songs that you grow up to that particular period in your life are going to impact you in ways. So a hit is a hit, and there's a million ways to have a hit. But a song that can grab you with the first bar or something, and Ventura is one of those things. At the minute the guitars kick in, you just instantly, it takes you back.
Yeah.
Is Ventura Highway about the highway in California?
Loosely, it's about Highway 101. There's no Ventura Highway, there might be a little piece called Ventura Highway, but it's usually Ventura Freeway. There's a Ventura Boulevard, there's a Ventura County, there's the town of Ventura. But I was trying to describe Highway 101 somewhere in that the town of Ventura area there. Again, that was reminiscing about my time as a young guy living in California with my parents. My dad was stationed at Vandenberg Air Force Base, the missile base, and it was an exciting time to live there. We'd always move every other year, it seemed like. So that stuck out in my mind as another place that I was inspired by. We'd drive down into L.A. and the surfing boom was on. It was like 1962, 63, and surf music became the first thing I really started to pick out on that guitar in my feral musician fashion. And then the Beach Boys came along and just blew that wide open too, and loved the Beach Boys. They've been strong mentors of ours for many years. Jerry was talking about bands that are older than us. Beach Boys have got a few miles on them as well. And we actually opened for the Beach Boys probably more than any other band when we were coming through the 70s and 80s, when we weren't doing our own shows. And we were always grateful to be able to do that and work with Brian Wilson, and just kind of a dream come true, having friendships and strong relationships with those guys.
We've sung on some of their records, and they've sung on some of ours, and I did a song or two on the Holland album, and I was meeting some people from the Beach Boy fan base. It's called Endless Summer, and they do a newsletter or something, and the guy was asking me what it was like to sing on Sailor. And I said, I don't think I sang on Sailor. And he goes, yes, you did. I have the track sheet right here. It's like, and I had, and I'd forgotten that I sang on it. So.
There were a lot of impromptu recording sessions in those days. Get down here. It's 3 a.m. We need something.
And you're on the spot. Do not go away. More of your questions for America when we come back. Hey, welcome back. We are here with more of your questions for America.
Welcome back.
A lot of these songs, Horse with No Name, Horse with No Name, Horse with No Name. Here we go. Mo and Jeff from South Carolina. Mo and Jeff want to know, Dewey, where's your favorite place to go fishing?
Now we're talking. Well, I do fish. That's one of my off-the-road activities that I've always enjoyed. Another thing that came from my youth, traveling around. My brother and I fished a lot. But I do like to fish in northern Wisconsin, where my wife and I have a little place. And I don't have to go far because there's a dock right outside the back door. And so there's nothing like sitting on the dock and with a bobber and a worm or some Rapala lures. We catch a lot of northern pike or walleye and bluegill and perch. Thank you, Jeff and Mo.
And Jeff and Mo also asked, Jerry, tell us about your new album, Carousel, please.
I had a studio for many years in my house, and I would record in every gap that we possibly had. And so I kind of logged a lot of recordings and half songs and things. And I closed up the studio a few years ago, and I asked our dear friend Jeff Larson to start archiving all the material. So we've come up with some great things, including the Lost and Found the America album that we put out last year, which was a real gem that he put together. And Carousel came from that. There was basically a completed album, but it was recorded over 15 years, actually, in a variety of times and spaces. But I then went in and finished the few songs that were incomplete. And so it's kind of a snapshot, but a very long time exposure.
By the way, I'd just like to say that Lost and Found project turned out to be a real wonderful thing for me, too, to listen back, because it's basically songs that we had written over the last 15 years, co-write Jerry and I, or Jerry or myself, and they were like the 12th or 13th or 14th song on a 10-song album.
Sure.
So they just were lost to time, and it was, again, only the passing of time gives you that chance to look back on something, and they hadn't been released. So they're the ones we decided on, and there was a mountain of them. Jerry has tons of stuff on hard drives and cassettes and 8 tracks. And, no 8 tracks. But it was great to do that, and we were really pleased the way it came out, and we didn't touch them, really.
No, they had to be mastered,
That was pretty much
Sure.
all. So they're like a little fossil from the past.
A fossil from the past. A feral musician who finds fossils.
Yeah.
This works.
Hey, there's a lyric.
There it is. Alan would like to know, what song surprised you when it became a hit?
Horse
Sister.
with no name.
Yeah, Horse with No Name. God, can we ever get past that?
I think, to be honest, when you're first young and you make a record and you put it out, in full disclosure, you might be mistakenly thinking that it might succeed. So to be honest, when we had a hit or two, we just felt that was normal. It's like that's what's supposed to happen. And in reality, of course, most acts suffer through quite a lengthy period of struggle and stuff. That probably happened later on in our case, but I don't think we had any songs that were surprisingly a hit. Most of the ones, Tin Man, Ventura Highway, and things were songs that we opened the album with. Sister Golden Hair opening. Actually, that didn't start the album, did it?
No.
I think Daisy started that album. But anyway, you've got a pretty good idea as you're working
Sure.
on which ones you think.
Great question from Tom, and this is why I like Tom. On the top it says, name, Tom. From, usually people put where they're from. Tom put his cabin number.
Party in Tom's room.
God bless you, Tom. Don't take blame for it. Blame it on Tom. From Ohio. Tom from Ohio.
All right, Ohio.
He's got a
Representing.
great question at the bottom here. Who thought of recording the heartbeat at the beginning of Daisy Jane?
Was it
When
on
we
the-
first started doing it, it was written with the opening chords that are repeated. Bum, dum. And when I played it, I would always tap my foot, and which kind of sounded like a heartbeat. But because you have to have your foot on the sustain pedal, we then said to David Dickey, can you just hit bum, bum, bum on the bass, which was supposed to just be a metered 4 count. And then as we listened to it, we heard bum, 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 ba-dum, bum, and we couldn't figure out where the ba-dum was coming from. And so we ended up having to solo every track in the song, and it was my foot lifting off the sustain pedal every 4. So that it happened by accident is what the heartbeat.
And by the way, Jerry just referenced David Dickey. David was our bass player in those early years. When we were a trio originally, sitting on stools, obviously there wasn't a lot of production. It was 3 acoustic guitars. And when we did have all the success, we had to expand, become a band with a rhythm section. And David Dickey was our bass player. I just wanted to mention that we lost David this year.
I'm very sorry.
It's bittersweet, but David's memory is constant in our work, our history, and he did do that on stage live. He'd do the bum bum bum. So it was great. Nice for talking about David.
Oh, great story. Thank you for sharing that. What was the best musical trick that George Martin showed you?
It's not really a trick, but when people ask, what do you learn from George Martin, it's a general statement, but he gave us focus. When we had done the Hat Trick album ourselves, we'd taken months to do this record, and it was the first time we'd experimented with strings and things. And after that album, we decided we should really turn this over to a producer. It's becoming a bigger and bigger job. So we set our sights, we made a list, and at the top of the list was George, and we never got past the first guy on the list. We went to George, and of course, as history shows it, he accepted, and we had a wonderful run. But when we met him, he said, because would you guys mind coming to England, because you take quite a while to record, and I can't be gone that long. And we said, we'd love to come. And so when we got there, he said, now I've held 2 months at Air Studios. I'm not saying we have to be done in 2 months, but we'll just see how we go. And so we then started recording the Holiday album, and we were done in 13 days, the entire album. And that
we
was
were
due
prepared for
that,
Mr. Martin.
And that was due to his focus. He brought focus back to us and
Yeah.
really focused the lens.
Wonderful man.
This one's not a question, it's more of a comment. Jerry and Victoria from Alexandria, Virginia, Birchmore to be exact, said, what can we do to get America into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? We love you. You're way overdue. So just so you know.
Thank you. We love the Birchmere.
I mean, now that Chicago's in,
Yeah, I know.
They open the doors.
what Rob from Akron, Ohio asks, what's the songwriting process like for you?
Certain people have a formula, and I usually use Elton John and Bernie Taupin as a great example of it, just an endless list of hits. They have never been in a room together to write a song. Elton has never written a word in his life. Bernie writes reams of poetry that Elton then just goes through and pairs with music. So I use that as an example of there is a million ways to do it. Both Dewey and I write music and lyrics, but I think Dewey would agree that it can come from just a line that you hear, or it can come from just the way a couple of chords sound together. We tend to use all of the above in our particular formula.
Yeah, it's always for me a couple of chords and a melody line over the top. And I do keep a little list of words, phrases, lines, a paragraph of thoughts if I think it's inspired for a moment in the car or something, and try and go back to those and pick out the pieces that will fit over that melody. Then I come to the tricky part, the bridge. Jerry! And a lot of the songs that we've co-written, Jerry's always been able to find a beautiful bridge for me in there. And but it's the verse, chorus, bridge. It's the formula A, B, A, B, C.
That's also why the bridge is far more difficult. It's 102 chords long. It's challenging.
Some bridges are the song. As Jerry and I have noted and learned over the years, rhyming isn't a necessity. When you listen to Paul Simon's America, the song America, there's not a rhyme in that thing. And so there's a lot of things you don't realize. You've got 3.5 minutes to write to paint a picture or to create a narrative or to evoke an emotion, and it doesn't seem like a lot of time, and some songs can cram a lot of that stuff into them in that 3 minutes, and we aspire to that. We were always driven by the singer-songwriter kind of ethic, if we could, follow those writers that we loved, Brian Wilson, Lennon and McCartney, dare we say, all of the great writers that we've always aspired to be, and hopefully met the mark at times. But songwriting is a wonderful. The latest Beatle bio that I watched on the plane the other day, McCartney was saying that was his hobby. A lot of his mates, and that's what he and Lennon had in common. It turned out to be their hobby. I thought that was a wonderful quote.
Good way.
It wasn't any. They just loved doing it because it was like collecting coins or any other hobby. They just love doing that, and wouldn't it be great?
All right, we have one more question. I apologize, we had a lot more questions, but every one of them is wanting to know what a horse with no name means.
Yeah.
So, Lori D'Angelo says, who is your favorite band other than America?
Wow.
Who do you listen to?
Well, the favorite band of all time, I would say Beach Boys. If you mean the whole spectrum. We were somewhat in the middle of that, because those of you who are pop aficionados and know the whole history know that there was quite a competition between Lennon and McCartney and George Martin, and all the genius that was happening on that side of the... And on the other side was Brian and the wonderful things he was doing with the Wrecking Crew and Van Dyke Parks and some other wonderful people. But they truly did monitor each other. So we've always said that for us, between those two sparks is where we kind of steered our ship. And as we got to work with George Martin for many years, didn't realize until we were having a dinner one time, and he said, let's play a game. Each of you name who you respectively look up to, you idolize the most. And I think I said probably Jimmy Webb, the composer, and Dewey said maybe Neil Young. And when we got to George Martin, we had no idea who he would, he's classically trained, who was he going to mention? And he said Brian Wilson. So it's fascinating to see how deep that actually went. And if I just may add, if I had to say a new, not new, they're not new at all anymore, but a band that I continually love because they do it old style. I love Tweedy and Wilco, Jeff Tweedy and Wilco. I think they're fantastic.
Beach Boys for me, definitely. If I, the old Desert Island, if I only could take one album, it would be, probably Pet Sounds or Surf's Up or anything with Brian's touch on it for me.
Well, you're on stage tonight.
Hey!
And tomorrow night, for the rest of the people, some of you are like, what? Are you looking forward to performing on the ship? This is the very first cruise we've ever done with 70s rock and romance, and you're going to be the inaugural act.
No, it's it.
Hey! Wow! Well,
we did want to mention, there's 2 nights and 2 shows, so tomorrow night we're going to do a completely different show. It's going to be the same songs, but we're going to try and play them a little better.
Did you hear how disappointed everybody got in that moment? Well,
ironically, I don't want to give too much away, but we won't be doing a Beach Boys song, but we're doing a Beatles song tomorrow. We don't do that a lot. We used to never do a Beatles song because we thought it was sacrilegious. Nobody can do a Beatles song. But we've done a few, and we're going to do one of those. Just a tip, just to let you know.
Well, I think we're all going to look forward to that. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come down here and be with us.
Thank you all.
And be on this
very
cruise.
much.
I'm your host, Jason. Thank you so much, my friends. One more time for America.
Thank you.